Narendra Modi becoming the Prime Minister has raised many questions in the minds of a large section of people in India, especially the minorities. Nucleus question being the future of secularism in the country. To discuss this issue, we have with us Professor Anil Kumar Vajpayee, who is the Head of Department Political Science, Government College, Daman. Welcome, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, so without further ado, let's go straight to the questions. My first question. Sir, it is believed that secularism is essential for multicultural societies. Do you agree with this?
Well, I am happy that you have raised this fundamental question. See what happens. Secularism is a value loaded term. And whenever you analyze a value loaded term, the thing which you must understand before knowing what it is, you should understand what it is not. Right? So look at the historical origin of the secularism. There are many myths associated with it. Like one of the most popular myths is that it is essential for multicultural societies. Without secularism, there will not be any multicultural societies. Like we require secularism because in absence of secularism, minorities will always be under threat. Right? And third myth could be secularism promotes a kind of tolerance among majority community towards minority communities. Let me debunk all these myths one by one, right? Just look at the historical context in which this term emerged. If you look at the 1400 years of European history, this concept emerged in the context of clash between Pope and the King, state and the church, right? When there was too much interference of Pope into the temporal affairs, secularism emerged as a reaction to this. So be very clear, its origin lays in monotheism. It has secularism as a principle of statecraft was unknown to multi-religious societies. As a shared worldview, it was never part of pluralistic cultures like India, right? Its origins lay in monotheism. It is deeply a Christian concept, as it is rightly said that secularism is gift of Christianity to mankind. So be very clear about this myth that is essential. Take for example, India was never a secular state, but this was one place where pluralism always prevailed. The best example is the most persecuted minorities since last 1000 years. Take the case of Parsis, take the case of Syrian Christians, take the case of Buddhists, take the case of Chakma refugees. All of them have found shelter in India, right? When there was no secularism. So the idea that secularism promotes tolerance is also one of the biggest myths that has been perpetuated. I'll give you one very good example in the context. When Europeans were fighting for secularism, they were fighting for rights for themselves, not for extending tolerance to others. Look at the history of Christianity. When Christians were fighting for secularism, they were fighting against Pope to seek to destabilize their theocracy in their own community, right? And Christianity as a religion always remained intolerant to the only surviving religion, that is Judaism. And thirdly, the argument that it generates a lot of tolerance for minorities feel safe in secularism. The two best examples are Mao and Stalin were most secular people, right? But what Mao did to Tibetans? The culture of Buddhist minority there is pulverized forever. The same kind of genocide was committed by Stalin. So the argument, we know the history of these two dictators. We also know the kind of tolerance they promoted. So never live under this delusion that secularism is essential. Its origin lies in monotheism. It was unknown as a principle of statecraft to pluralistic societies. On the other hand, we have examples of Eastern societies which had nothing to do with secularism. You can find all kinds of tolerance in these societies. So the right word should have been pluralism, not secularism.
What do you think is the real meaning of secularism and how is it different from pluralism?
It's very, very difficult to answer in the present context, but let me take second part of the question first. Pluralism is a belief system which permits, which believes that diverse faith, diverse line of thinking, diverse ideologies can coexist peacefully with each other. Now, this line of thinking comes since we are discussing it in the context of India and Hinduism being the dominant religion here. This pluralistic thinking has been the ingrained part of Hindu civilization. Diverse path, accepting their validity comes quite natural. It is quite inherent to a Hindu. I mean, if you look at the history, if you look at the scriptural or any understanding, take for example, one of our oldest scriptures, Rig Veda says, Ekam Sat Bahuda Vipraya Vedanti, means truth is one, wise men call it variously, right? And Anu Bhadro Karvate Yantu, means let noble thoughts come to us from all directions of the universe. There is absolutely no, I mean, you do not find this kind of fundamentalism that only my path is correct. If you don't follow this path, you will be burned in the eternal fire of hell. Right here it says anything, and not only that. Here in Hindu society, pluralism has gone to the extent of saying here freedom of religion also means freedom from religion. God exists is only a hypothesis which can be doubted, debated, and contradicted based on personal experience. Right? So, here the ultimate point of reference is realization of self, not making somebody else accept the superiority of your religion. So, this is pluralism. Secularism, I made it very clear, unnecessarily we attribute many good virtues to secularism like tolerance and others which it never possessed. But with the passage of times, words do change, right? Usage becomes more important than etymology. This has something happened to secularism as well. We don't know when usage has eroded etymology. For the argument's sake, I'll accept that yes, secularism means tolerance. So, we cannot keep on sticking to the very technical meaning or dictionary meaning, and because as I said, many a times as societies move, usage of the word becomes more important than etymology. So, how secularism is used today? I can give you a very legalistic meaning, a constitutional meaning of secularism. Secularism broadly means that absence of discrimination based on religion, one. Two, every person is free to preach, practice, or propagate a religion of choice, or if he does not believe, to remain agnostic or even atheistic. And thirdly, state will not have any official religion to promote. A secular state is in sharp contrast to a theocratic state. Take for example, Pakistan is a theocratic state. It itself claims itself to be an Islamic state. Bhutan is not a secular state, it is a theocratic state because it is a Buddhist state. Sri Lanka is a Buddhist state. Many Latin American countries are specifically Christian states, they are not secular states, right? So if a state does not have any official religion of its own, it is called a secular state. So let me come back to your first question. Secularism broadly means four things. Firstly, absence of discrimination based on religion, equality of opportunity to every religion, right? Some sort of equal respect, and then individual will be treated as unit of state dealing, his caste, community, and other considerations irrelevant, not only irrelevant, but deliberately shut out from considerations. And lastly, every individual is free to preach, practice, or propagate a religion of choice. At the same time, if he wants, he can remain atheist. If he wants, he need not believe in any religion. This is what a modern secular state is. I think this is what every constitution, every secular, democratic, modern constitution means by secularism.
So that was really very informative. So, but do you think the kind of secularism which is practiced, which has been being practiced since post-independent India, is a deviation from the original meaning, or is it suitable for a deeply religious society like India?
See, these arguments work both the ways. There are a section of people which says that this kind of secularism has literally created intense resentment among majority community. On the other hand, there is an equally strong section which feels that no, this kind of secularism is needed to reassure minorities. I'll come to both the views. Let me start when I said secularism, essence of secularism is absence of discrimination. Unfortunately, the kind of secularism that was practiced in India was based on dual standards, was based on invidious discriminations, and was based on all that is against the spirit of secularism. Secularism says that recognize individual as individual, whereas the kind of secularism that was practiced in India was no, we will recognize group rights, we will provide identity based privileges. Now, as I said, this model of secularism was deeply flawed. It led to feeling of separatism among minorities and created intense resentment among majority community. After all, why do you think gurudwaras, churches, and mosques, there is complete autonomy, but Hindu temples are governed by Ministry of Endowments under Endowments Act? Whenever a Muslim is killed, or for that matter, during communal riots they suffer, there is furor all over the parliament. But the same people impose some sort of a self-censorship when 6 lakhs Hindus are driven out in their own country and live as refugees in Jammu and Kashmir, Kashmiri Pandits. So I could see flaw not only in terms of theory, but it is deeply flawed in matters of practice as well. And let me tell you, it benefits no one. The moment secularism accommodates identity politics, it does not remain secularism anymore. Right? I mean, to answer the second part of the question, that is, there are many writers who say that we should not have, after all, a wall of separation between state and church, between temporal and spiritual matters, is a typical Western model not suitable to India. Right? I mean, this view is almost quoted. I do agree that secularism in India has to accommodate Indian specificities and Indian situations. But while defining so, we cannot define secularism in a manner which is exactly opposite of secular spirit. In fact, every dictator tries to define democracy this way. Every dictator claims himself to be democratic by saying, why I should follow typical the Western model. My model of democracy is different. So we should be guard against it. I can understand secularism. If you want to accommodate one particular section, you have to accommodate all. You can't have dual standards. Please remember, there can't be 2 points of tolerance in society. If your aim is cohesion, if your aim is national integration, if your aim is national unity, you can't achieve this by internalizing and constitutionalizing and legalizing dual standards based on invidious discrimination. Please understand, there is close relationship between process and purpose of politics. If your purpose is national cohesion and unity, then process cannot be based on divisions, discriminations, and other kinds of identity promoting processes. So, the kind of secularism that was practiced in India was deeply flawed. I always say that if you feel that secularism in India, which is a deeply religious society, should accommodate religious aspirations, then it should accommodate religious aspirations of every community. If you want to concede one thing to Muslims, do concede the same thing to Hindus, do concede the same thing to every section of society. Right? And plus, not only that, our model of secularism has been deeply mischievous, because when Indian politicians, intellectuals talk about secularism, they talk about only Muslims. Are Parsis not minorities? Are Buddhists not minorities? Are Jains not minorities? Why is that these people don't talk about them? Do you think is secularism confined only to Muslims and Christians? So I for one always believe that secularism in India, as it was practiced since Nehruvian time, has been based on minority appeasement. It was a code word to seek minority votes en bloc.
So, is there any threat to multiculturalism in India? And don't you think the minorities need to be protected?
Once again, I would like to answer the second part of the question first. Fundamental question is, who are minorities? Minorities are a section of people whose number is quite minor, say in lakhs, sometimes in thousands, right? Take for example, Indians in America are minority. Christians in many Islamic countries are minorities, right? Parsis is a typical case of minority in India, right? So the thing is that minorities does not mean religious minorities alone. Minorities can be based on ethnicity, minorities can be based on language, minorities can be based on geographical locations. Unfortunately, in India, what has happened is, because of this vote bank politics, the moment we say minorities, everybody refers to Christians and Muslims. I mean, here is a community whose population is 25 crores, which is almost double the population of England. 80% of the countries individually do not have a population of 25 crores. Would you like to call it as minority? The right term to describe Muslims in India is second largest majority, not minority, right? And frankly speaking, I do accept the premise that minority in every society needs to be protected. And already our constitution have enough safeguard for minorities. And that precisely is the reason why I raised the issue of Hindu minorities in Jammu and Kashmir. Don't you think Hindus are minorities in Kashmir? Hindus are minorities in Northeast. Hindus are minorities in Lakshadweep. And when we talk about minorities, why talk only about Muslims? Our constitution recognizes lingual minorities as well. Take for example, Hindi speaking people in Hyderabad are minority. Marathis are minorities. Gujaratis are minorities. All these are minorities. All these people needs to be protected. I do agree that in every society, every minorities, irrespective whether religious, lingual or regional, needs to be protected from majoritarian pressures. And our constitution assures enough safeguard for all minorities in the country. And there are certain special rights of minorities, especially please read Article 25 to 30. But nobody should misuse these provisions. Unfortunately, in India, these constitutional safeguards are being misused. The classic example is that read Article 29. What does it say? Every minority has a right to preserve their language, culture and script. Open your institutions. You have all the freedom, everything. But under the garb of that, you cannot keep on opening engineering colleges and medical colleges. So, as far as the fundamental concern of your question is concerned, it is perfectly taken. In every society, minority needs to be protected from majoritarian pressures. But again, we must ensure that this principle also is universally applied. The moment if you apply it selectively, it smacks of opportunism, it smacks of vote bank politics. Regarding the multiculturalism, please remember, Indian society has always been multicultural. This question should be asked to the religions which believe in exclusivist claims. Today, on account of globalization, on account of international migration, on account of movement of people across the globes, societies increasingly are becoming plural, increasingly are becoming multicultural. And which society are uncomfortable in? Please try to know what is happening around the world. Which two major religions are having problem with this kind of multiculturalism? It is primarily Christianity and Islam. Christianity to a lesser extent, because there has been huge impact of Renaissance, Reformation, secularization of value system, democratic spirit, scientific spirit in Christianity community. But unfortunately, similar impact we find missing on Islam. It is yet to produce a Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Jefferson, Martin Luther, scientists like Newton or Einstein. That partially explains why Islam has more problem with multiculturalism and Christianity to a lesser extent. That precisely is the reason why two of the well-known European leaders, Chancellor of Germany Angela Merkel, Prime Minister of Britain David Cameron, both of them have accepted that multiculturalism has failed in Europe. Whereas, come to India, Indian society has always been multicultural. We don't have any kind of problem with multiculturalism. Please remember, Indian constitution is one of the largest written document in the world. Show me one article in our constitution that militates against secularism, that militates against pluralism, or that militates against multiculturalism. If at all there is any discrimination in our constitution, it is in favor of minorities, not against them.
Many critics say that Indian secularism is sham. There is no voice of minorities because every function of government starts with the breaking of coconut, applying vermilion or kumkum, which are distinctly Hindu symbols. So, what do you think of this?
Well, a very good question indeed, because this question creates a lot of misunderstanding among different sections of the people. Please remember, India, Hinduism or the word Hindu has more a cultural and geographical connotation than religious ones. Right? Take for example Hindustan Limited. Does it mean only Hindus work there? Right? So the thing is that the word Hindu has more a cultural and geographical connotation than religious one. And the word in every society or every country or every culture, which may be secular or not, there are certain overriding trends of that culture that does get reflected in the political structures of the country or in the political symbolism of the country. Take for example, America is a secular state, but American president takes oath in the name of Bible and not the Constitution. You don't question the secular credentials of America. In England, you have concept of state churches. The proceedings of House of Commons and Lords starts with quotations from Bible. Nobody questions the secular credentials of that country. Similarly, there are umpteen number of Christian states which does get, the Christian symbolism does get reflected in state functions. Nobody questions their secular credentials, although they are, officially secular states. Similarly, though our country is secular, but the overriding trend of the culture in Hinduism. So India is Hindu state in the same way as America is Christian state.
Okay, so sir, coming to the big question. What is the future of secularism in our country? And sir, do you think the Bharatiya Janata Party is a secular party?
Yes.
Sir, but they have been raising issues like Article 370, Uniform Civil Code, cow slaughter. So what do you think? What do you want? On what basis are you telling that the BJP is a secular party?
Firstly, I would like, there are assumptional errors in your question. Because issues like Article 370, Ram Janambhoomi, Uniform Civil Code, cow slaughter are not necessarily communal issues. I'll keep Ram Janambhoomi aside for the time being, because this interview does not, in this interview we do not have time to examine dispassionately historical evidences, epigraphical evidences, inscriptional evidences, archaeological evidences, literary evidences,
Of course. Yes, sir.
revenue records.
Yes, sir.
So let me keep Ram-Janmabhoomi issue on the side for the time being.
All right.
Let us take the other three issues.
Absolutely.
Uniform Civil Code, Article 370, and cow slaughter.
Yes.
Let me tell you, these three are not communal issues. They are not even political issues. They are constitutional issues. They are very much part of the constitution. Cow slaughter and Uniform Civil Code are the mandate of the constitution. What does Article 44 of the constitution say? State shall promote uniform civil code all over the country. It does not say state may. It's a constitutional mandate to promote. How does that becomes a communal issue? And what BJP is raising in this context? It is not saying to to hurt the cultural sensibilities of Muslims. Already, if you think that Shariat should be applied everywhere, why not in criminal law? When you can have one criminal law, why not one civil law? And that too, within civil law, what are the questions? It is only with regard to marriage, divorce, custody of the child, and maintenance. Frankly speaking, if we do not do this, we are violating the constitution. Read Article 15(3), which provides for some kind of protective discrimination for women. By denying this benefit to Muslim women, actually we are discriminating against Muslim women.
Yes,
and look at Article 370. Article 370 is also constitutional mandate. Today, every political party says that that is the commitment given to Kashmiris at the time of independence. As a result, nobody can touch Article 370. It is the solemn commitment of Government of India, and they want to parade this as symbol of secularism. Nothing is further from the truth. Please read the heading of this article. What is written there? Temporary transitory provisions. When this question was asked to Pandit Nehru in Parliament about the status of Article 370, he said in Hindi, Samvidhan ki dhara 370 घिसते घिसते घिस जाएगी. Means slowly and steadily other part of Indian constitution will apply to
state of expected
Jammu,
yes.
Jammu and Kashmir. And thinking that that Constituent Assembly is dissolved now, only that Constituent Assembly can approve the merger of Kashmir into Indian Union is as good as saying that British Parliament, do you think if British Parliament nullifies the Indian Independence Act of 1947, does India become colony of British?
Absolutely not.
Then, I mean, that is exactly British power is empowered to do that. It is, analogy is similar.
Yes.
Well, coming to, there are 100 areas where I differ with BJP. I have my own reservations about BJP with regard to fighting corruption, with regard to role of the state. Please remember, in post-independence India, there has been only two principal stand in Indian politics. First was role of state, the stand of Swatantra Party, whereby they said put an end to license permit Raj of Nehru, cut down the state as much as possible. That was the most principal stand. I see even attitude of BJP quite lax, hesitating and halting with regard to role of state. The most principal stand was by Swatantra Party, especially a leader like C. Rajagopalachari. And second principal stand has been BJP stand on secularism. If you go by the conventional definition of the secularism, if you go by the legalistic definition of secularism, then only one party qualifies to be called as secular in India, and that is BJP. Secularism does not mean granting unequal favors. Secularism does not mean going in for communal headcount in army. Secularism does not mean granting unequal favors based on identity. Secularism does not mean going in for communal budgets, communal budgetary provisions. So, if after all, what BJP says? BJP says justice for all, appeasement to none. This comes most closest to secularism. Yes. As I said, I have my own reservations about BJP in terms of performance, in terms of, their ability to fight corruption or their willingness to fight corruption. But this is one area where not only me, a large section of forward-looking Indians are in total agreement with BJP, and election results have proved that.
But sir, you haven't answered my question. The future of secularism in India.
Well, future depends on what you do in the present. I see, frankly speaking, as the situation stands now, I see a great future for our secularism. But again, if you go back to the same kind of identity politics, then frankly speaking, I see a very dark future for secularism. Why I am hopeful? Because the present election has completely marginalized all those politicians who were playing caste and communal identities. This election is significant more ways than one. Besides shattering the myth that coalitions are here to stay and many other myths, the biggest thing this election has done is to completely marginalize and reject all those politicians who were playing identity politics.
Thank you, sir. It was really a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.